Earlier this year, IWC released what might be their finest pilot's watch to date, with very little accompanying fanfare. The Mark 20, successor to the legendary World War II aviation icon, the Mark 11, is the latest in its prestigious pedigree, and with a series of quality of life improvements across the board, it's arguably the best yet. The heritage of the Mark 20 dates back to 1935, when the original Mark 9 was supplied by IWC to the RAF. It was a distinctive, legible pilot's watch whose successor, the Mark 10, is part of the famous Dirty Dozen of wartime watches. For collectors, though, it's all about the version released in 1948, the aptly named Mark 11. It was described by the RAF at the time as a highly accurate timepiece suitable for astronavigation purposes. They definitely believed it, too. Not only did they stamp the famous broad arrow of the Ministry of Defense on the dial, each Mark 11 was regularly sent back for servicing, part of the reason there is a good number of surviving pieces. So what was so good about it? Well, it had the clear, clean dial a pilot needed to be able to read the watch at a glance, emphasized by the high contrast white on black. It was also far more waterproof and shockproof than previous models and housed the caliber 89, a renowned movement for the time. Unlike most watches of the era that used a small seconds, the Mark 11 used a sweeping central hand. In short, it did everything an aviator needed more reliably than ever before. It was so successful that it was produced for a grand total of 36 years. In the years since, IWC has run through the marks, including the hugely underrated 38mm pilot's watch Mark 15 Classic, at a much brisker pace, and the most recent to semi-retire, the Mark 18, was released as recently as 2016. Not quite the 3.5 decades of service as the 11. It was replaced quietly and as under the radar as a stealth bomber by the Mark 20 earlier this year, and in many ways the collection's evolution is complete. While it's still clear they're related, they share the same white on black dial with rectangular indexes at 3, 6, 9, and 12, with a triangle pointing to the last, the changes across the years from the Mark 11 to the Mark 20 are equally obvious. It's grown from a vintage 36mm to 40mm. Its anti-magnetism has been improved with a soft iron inner case, the water resistance is greater, and the movement is far better than watchmakers in the 40s would have dreamed of, complete with a slightly unnecessary date window. The changes between the Mark 18 and the Mark 20, though, are far more nuanced. In dimensions, it shares the same 40mm case, but it's both thinner, 10.8mm versus 11mm, and offers shorter lugs that hug the wrist. Together, these changes make it substantially more wearable than the 18 without changing its looks. It's still a big watch, though, one that feels far bigger than its measurements might suggest. On the practical side, it has a larger crown, all the better for operating with flying gloves if that's your kink, and the water resistance has finally been increased from 60 meters to a much more serviceable 100. Dial-wise, there are a number of small changes that add up to a more balanced, readable watch. The entire minute track has been upsized a touch, but most notable are the cardinal hour markers, which have been elongated, helping them stand out from the other hours. The iron sights dots either side of the triangle, used for telling which way was up in the dark, have been moved closer in too. Very subtly, the seconds hand has also been tipped so that it follows the dial better and more clearly points at the correct number. One thing they changed for the worse, however, was the date window, which is now a high contrast white. In my humble opinion, keeping it black a la the Mark 18 would have been more visually balanced, but at least it's in a better position now. Finally, and this is probably the biggest reason the Mark 20 exists, is the new movement. As the change in height indicates, the new in-house 32111 caliber is slimmer than the previous 35111. More dramatically, it also has a 120-hour power reserve. It's a serious improvement, even if it opts for a traditional rotor rather than IWC's more advanced Peloton system. The new movement also feeds into the price, though perhaps not as dramatically as you might be expecting. The IWC Mark 18 was, and still is for the moment, £4,100. The new piece is almost a grand more expensive at £5,050. Given all these changes, though, and given just how much better the new watch feels on the wrist, I'd say that it's worth it. The only question remains is what happened to the 19. Thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments whether you think the Mark 20 is an improvement on the 18.